This video is all about the Mavic 2 Zoom versus the Mavic 2 Pro and how they compare against each other. So I took both these drones out to the desert on a day where I was actually shooting for a larger piece that I'm doing. So I'm helping shoot a little mini documentary about my parents' install of their new container house out in the middle of Yucca. If you don't know where Yucca is, that's basically Joshua Tree. It almost looks like Joshua Tree on their property, which is amazing. So I went out there to kind of cover the install of these containers being taken off the trucks and put onto the steel frame that has been built in the middle of the desert. So what I did is I brought both the Mavic 2 Zoom and the Pro with me so I could shoot side by side and see which one I like better when I'm out shooting, because I'm not gonna always carry a Pro and a Zoom with me. And that's one big flaw I think DJI made with this product, is that they have drones that are identical except for the gimbal and the camera. So you have to choose between either one, and both have their advantages and their disadvantages. And I'm hoping that through this video, you'll get an idea of which is better suited for you and the type of shooting that you're doing. All right, before we get into my thoughts about each drone individually, let's just look at some of the footage and what I got shooting with both the Zoom and the Pro. There's a few things that I noticed right off the bat when I'm shooting with these cameras. First off, the Mavic 2 Zoom straight out of camera is very sharp and it's more of a blue tint to it. Whereas the Mavic 2 Pro has more of an organic look to it, so it's a little softer, and the overall look is more orange. It's a huge difference when you put them side by side and you're shooting in like a standard profile. Now, when you're shooting in the flat profile and you start color grading, both these cameras give you the ability to do some pretty cool stuff in post and change the colors and work with them so you can get some really good looking footage. And so that's something I want to talk about, is that depending on how much color grading and how much work you're putting into post might change which drone you want to use. So the Pro definitely has a better look straight out of camera. So when you're working with the Pro, you have that aperture, which gives you the ability to close down to an f11, which is pretty amazing. You can get this cool like starburst effect when you shoot towards the sun. You can also fly without necessarily needing ND filters to get your shutter speed down, so you don't have that high shutter speed look. That's something I really like about it. Now, I don't have ND filters right now, so that's something that I wish I had them to compare them side by side, and I'll do that again down the road, because I think that would make a huge difference if they were both shooting at the same shutter speed, because right now when I was shooting, the Pro definitely has more motion blur, which makes it more cinematic. So the Pro definitely has more of that cinematic look. It's, like I said, it's more organic. It has a little softer feel to it, which if you add some sharpening in post, you can get that hyper sharp look if that's what you want. Whereas the Zoom, it's very sharp right out of camera. It's more blue. It's gonna take a little bit more effort in post to get it to the cinematic look. But the huge advantage that the Zoom has is the zoom lens, and it's pretty incredible. And it's something that I didn't really think about until I was out shooting with it. Now, when I had it up in the air and I was shooting the containers being installed, I was able to get super close and get some really cool detailed shots without having to get my drone right up there in the action. So I got to stay a little bit further away, zoom in, and I was able to get some pretty awesome shots that you wouldn't be able to get normally, because you don't want to like fly right up to the crane when it's working. And there's a lot of situations where having that zoom lens is going to be a huge advantage, because it actually has a really decent zoom. You could fly a little bit further away and get an awesome image that's going to help tell your story better. And so that's one thing you gotta think about. Are you going for more of the storytelling aspects of a drone, or are you going for more of like the photo image quality? Obviously, both are tools to tell your story. The Zoom just gives you some extra tools to be able to zoom in, get some different size shots without having to fly super close to different things. Something to think about, something that I actually really like about the Zoom, and which is pushing me more into wanting to use the zoom more often than the Pro. So when I was out in the desert, I had both drones sitting there, both charged up, everything ready to go. And I found myself, I kept going back to the zoom over and over because I just really liked playing with that lens. I could do some cool things where I'm punched in on the full length of the lens and spin around whatever it is that I'm shooting and get that really cool parallax look in the background. Another thing is that you could do things like foreground objects, so you have that more depth created because you have objects in the foreground, objects in the background. You're not always shooting on a wide lens, which is not something we've really had the ability to do until the Pro. I mean, you could get the Inspire with different lenses on it, but it's so much easier in the Mavic Pro 2 zoom. You can get some really cool detailed shots with that zoom lens. So my thoughts on which drone you should get really comes down to what you're doing. When it comes to photography, hands down the Pro is amazing. You get some awesome photos, especially with that f11 lens. You can stop it down, get sharp, get really detailed, and the dynamic range looks amazing on the Pro. Now, when it comes to video, it all depends on how much you're manipulating the video and how much you're gonna work with it. If you're someone who's gonna do a ton of color grading and really work with it, then you'll probably want the Pro because you have more ability to work with the colors and get some really cool looking footage. Also, if you're someone who's not gonna touch the footage at all, the Pro might be a good option because out of camera, the footage looks great. Now, the 2 zoom is definitely for people who just wanna have more cameras in the sky. So not just a wide lens, you can zoom in. Don't get me wrong, the camera on the 2 is really good and I really like it as well. It's just not as good as the Pro. However, if you put a little bit of work into grading, you can make the footage look really amazing with the 2 zoom. And when I was shooting flat and I was shooting at the right time of day and everything like that, the 2 zoom looks amazing. When you're shooting flat in the middle of the day, these 2 drones, you couldn't really tell the difference. The biggest difference that I saw was at sunrise and sunset, and that's where the Pro shines. That's where you get awesome colors, you get more dynamic range, you can really do some cool stuff. But if you're just shooting for more story, then you're gonna want the zoom because the zoom gives you that added flexibility. It gives you that ability to sit back, zoom in, get some different shots that you wouldn't necessarily get. With the 2 zoom straight out of camera, it's not gonna look as good as the Pro out of camera. So if you're not someone who's gonna do anything in post and you're just gonna shoot straight out of camera, then I might push you more towards the Pro. Whereas if you're someone who wants to do a little bit of color grading, the zoom will work great because you can definitely add a little touch to it and get some awesome looking footage. So it all comes down to what it is that you're shooting, how you're gonna process the footage. Me personally, I really like the Pro, but I'm most likely gonna shoot the zoom way more often. It gives me way more flexibility. It's an awesome camera. I just love having that zoom lens and you can do some really cool stuff. So I'm gonna put a little bit of time into color grading my footage on the zoom, and I'm gonna continue to work with this camera and figure out the best settings so that I can get the most cinematic look out of it using the limitations that the zoom had. There's definitely a lot of ways that you can play with like the sharpness, the saturation, the contrast in camera, and it's gonna affect how the image is gonna look. So that's something I'm definitely gonna dive more into because I think the camera as is great. If you tweak the settings a little bit in camera with a specific LUT geared towards this camera looking a certain way, I think the zoom is really gonna shine and it gives you some awesome footage that you're not gonna get with that wide lens. All right guys, I hope this was helpful and give you some ideas of the differences between the Pro and the 2 zoom. If you're new here to this channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I've got a lot of awesome filmmaking tutorials. I do some drone stuff, some camera reviews. And guys, I have a creator film school that's nuts to bolts, everything that you need to know to have a career as a creator. So guys, check out the links down below in the description and I will see you on the next one.